out this assessment statement from our study guide. We're going to focus in on cells as the smallest unit of self-sustaining life. And in this presentation, in this video, we're going to discuss the challenges of defining matter as living or non-living. We're going to discuss reasons why cells are considered to be living, and then we're going to discuss reasons why viruses are not considered to be living. So if you were asked, someone stopped you on the street, what is life or what makes something alive, I think we all have a general notion. We know that a rock, for example, is not alive and a kitten is alive. But when we get into the details, sometimes things can be a bit confusing. There's been lots and lots of definitions as to what makes something alive. And to be honest with you, it isn't necessarily all that important that everyone agrees on a single definition, because life is diverse, and in biology we know that there are always exceptions no matter how good we think our definitions are. So for example, we look at our red blood cells, and our red blood cells are largely responsible for carrying oxygen all across our body, so that oxygen can be used in cell respiration to do cool stuff. But if you look at a red blood cell, they don't necessarily prescribe to the characteristics of a living thing. They're just essentially like a jelly donut filled with this specialized protein called hemoglobin. They don't have a lot of the other organelles that we associate with eukaryotic cells. Another exception to this rule would be fungi. Fungi are made up of microscopic structures called hyphae, and hyphae don't necessarily have cell membranes. They tend to flow into each other and create this vast network that are far greater in size than what we would think of when you think of a cell. Some of the largest organisms on Earth are actually fungal mats that exist below the soil and can extend for hundreds of square kilometers. We know that mules present some challenges for our definition of what life is. A mule is a hybrid, right? It's definitely alive. It eats, it grows, it reacts, it excretes, but they're sterile, right? They're not technically a species. And I'm sure you've heard of like ligers or tigons or zebroids. They fall into this as well. And then there's this unique bacteria called Coxiella burnetii, I think I'm pronouncing that right, that acts a lot like a virus and can't necessarily reproduce outside of its host. And so since it needs help with reproduction and doesn't prescribe to Mrs. H. Gren, is it considered alive? And that brings us to viruses. We know that viruses are not alive based on our current definition as to what life is. And that's because viruses don't do any of the things that we equate with being alive. They're not made up of cells. They can't maintain homeostasis. They don't necessarily grow. And they can't replicate themselves without the support of a host. So for these reasons, under our current definitions of living things, we don't consider viruses to be alive. So I hope this short video addressed this particular learning assessment statement. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me via email.